So then, even if the standards of morality are based on what we value, this, Dr. Stokes says, doesn't mean that there isn't anything objective about morality. There can be an objective fact of the matter about whether something meets a moral standard, even if the standard is itself is subjective.
So maybe we can sneak objectivity into it, right?
And so he has I think a really sharp example here. So the question is, what makes a good knife? Well, a good knife, as we all know, is that it's sharp. Okay, well, there might be butter knives and steak knives and serrated knives, and so there might be types of knives. But when we come to think of knife forms, we kind of think of sharpness as being an objective standard for determining whether or not a knife is good. And so we talk about the knife's sharpness. We believe that there's objective sharpness. When we're valuing sharpness is, though, subjective. So, we can kind of measure the edge. We can measure, how it slices through butter and dices julienne fries, and we can run it through all the tests. For those of you who don't even watch commercials anymore, because I don't think they even make them, you always had the Ginsu knives that
slice and dice
would cut a tin can, but then be able to go right through the tomato like it was nothing. The infomercials were great back then, and so then it would seem there is indeed evaluating objectivity despite the subjectivity of the value itself. That there's normative facts about whether something meets a standard.
Right. So the standard is sharpness, and we can have an objective fact. Then how sharp is the knife, or that sort of thing. That is the standard, and it seems like now we have objectivity, right? We can say, does the knife meet this particular objective standard that we have of sharpness?
Yeah. So let's kind of apply this to a person. So you're in the military, and your job is to take out the enemy. And so you go and you say, I go out into the middle of the battlefield. I yell really loud. I tell the enemy, "Hey, we're both human beings. We're fighting over the same dirt. This seems illogical," and you get the other side to put down their arms.
That's right.
You are a good soldier. Well, no, because the people who have grouped you into this unit want you to go out and kill the other side.
Yeah.
And so you are being objectively terrible soldier at that point in time. You may get the job done, but you're not doing it in the same fashion as what they want. So you're a bad soldier. Now, someone who's a marksman that can get 10 out of 10 on the bullseye and take out the enemy that way, that is what the valuer, the high up in command, want. And so you might be a good diplomat, but you need to not be a good soldier in that regard.
So it is objective. Well, he's going to say no.
Right. It's again this attempt to find in a subjective universe an objective standard, like well-being was attempted to measure the EKG of the same stuff, and so again we still had some issues with that. So the standard itself is not objective.
Yeah, and that's the issue, right?
Right.
What we measure may be, and how we measure may be objective, but where does the standard come from?
Right.
The standard is subjective.
Mm-hmm.
We determine the standard.
Right.
So we haven't got, our objective value here. We determine the standard.
Right. And we see that today with half the country thinking the founding fathers were good. Well, okay, but the other half think they were bad because they owned slaves or were rich men who wanted to keep more of their money, or they rebelled against the sovereign, and so again, the good or the bad again, those aren't from nature that we're pulling out. It's by what criteria are we judging that good man? Right. The good man is one who overthrows the government in order to bring about the United States of America as it currently is, so that I can then question them, or is it bad for George Washington owned slaves, but yet fight for the freedom of men to be free? And so again, we're having to make sure that our terms aren't crossed with our old way of thinking from the pre-Enlightenment age, where there was a lawgiver.
And so the choice of the standard, he suggests, depends on the function of the thing that we're looking at.
Right. So with a knife is good if it is sharp. So humans declare that a knife ought to be sharp because we value sharp knives in more contexts. Our choice for that standard for a good knife depends on the knife's intended function. What was that knife for? So again, going back to, if you're a butter knife, you don't need to be sharp, but for all things being equal, knives should be sharp. So remember, we're ultimately looking for the source of moral standards themselves. And this is Dr. Soto saying, and if I'm right, that source is our values, desires, and preferences. Oh man, this seems like presuppositional. To put it differently, we're the source, at least if naturalism is true. If, on the other hand, theism is true, then the standards to be depend on God's values, as we'll see. And again, I don't want to get too much into this because, again, next chapter. I swear the answers are next chapter. But he's still going based on this premise of values being subjective and God being the ultimate one who can declare these subjective values as being the greatest being, because he's the lawgiver, he's the maker, he's, all these things. He's the one who knows best. He sits from on high and can tell us what's best for his purposes and plan. And so he declares what's good and bad. And again, we'll get into Euthyphro's dilemma and all that stuff too in the next chapter.